not only have I got the worst slot of the whole conference, I have also now got to follow Peter's very amusing presentation. So let's see how it goes. I'm Sally Evans. I'm the Aerial Survey Manager at Historic England. The idea for this paper came about because this year marks 60 years since the establishment of the Air Photo Unit, which is now the aerial survey team at Historic England and the Historic England Archive. And it was created really as a focus to collate and collect aerial photographs and begin to create monument records of archaeology of England. It's also just over 40 years since the establishment of the Aerial Archaeology Research Group, which came together to really foster collaboration and standardisation of aerial archaeology, first of all within England, but now currently across Europe. How fantastic. I'm going to shape this paper by undertaking a SWOT analysis. And that is a tool that you can use to really focus and think about the position that aerial survey is in now, but also start to strategically think about where you might want to take the discipline over the next 40 years or even 60 years. I'm going to focus about aerial archaeology as a whole, not just focused on England, but obviously England is the area I know best, so the examples that I will use probably are mainly England, but we're talking about the topic of aerial survey as a whole. Let's look at some strengths. Look at the brains that we've got in this audience today. How much experience do we have in this room? And it's absolutely fantastic. We have seen throughout this conference the breadth and scope of the work that's been undertaken across Europe. We're looking at large area projects, small projects. The scope varies, but the work that we're producing is absolutely outstanding. Wonderful. I think we can also say that the discipline as a whole has really matured over the last 40 years, and there's really now a confidence in the discipline and where it's going and what we can deliver. Obviously, another key strength that we've got is the range of sources that are now available. When the APU was set up 60 years ago, they would have never believed the range and types of sources that we could use. Obviously, LiDAR's revolutionised aerial survey, but so has orthophotography. And it can really help us understand landscape and landscape change, as we've seen. Another great thing has been the democratisation of aerial survey, particularly with the advent of orthophotography. It's now more widely available. We've seen the use of LiDAR widely and freely available across much of Europe. The use of drones is really made so for everybody can participate in aerial archaeology. And we're no longer seen as crazy outsiders. It's Rebecca disagrees. But we really are starting to see aerial archaeology used in everyday heritage practice. So contractors now, so for the example on the bottom right, are undertaking drone surveys in advance of archaeological excavation. And that's just an example from the High Speed 2 railway link. And obviously methodologies continue to change and improve as well. So all those are strengths. The Open Data Hub, so means of data sharing, we're getting much more agile in the way we're sharing data. Look at the work that's undertaken in Ukraine and England. Fantastic. Thinking about weaknesses. And obviously you may disagree with some of the things that I'm suggesting are weaknesses, but weaknesses can also become strengths if you think about what you're doing. So I've just said that data sharing is fantastic, and it absolutely is, but there are problems associated with that. So in terms of the Mapping Explorer, we're presenting over 30 years of projects as a single data set. And obviously the scope and methodologies used has really varied over time. And if somebody is looking at the mapping and they think that it's all fairly recent mapping and they don't understand the foibles of aerial survey, that may mean that they lose confidence in the data set as a whole and in the technique as a whole. So just to demonstrate some of the weaknesses, oh, gosh, this is zany. So some of the early projects were hand-drawn, so the Kent NMP was one of the first hand-drawn projects, and you can see some of the archaeological features there were mapped in, which are mapped in black in this image, and you can see that there's an offset between the current mapping, which is just the Thanet NMP, the Thanet Aerial Investigation and Mapping Project, which we've just completed, and you can see that there's an offset between some of those features, and also some features weren't mapped. If somebody is going to do an excavation and they are using your early NMP project as a way of citing a trench and they miss the archaeology, do they think that we're making things up? Do they think it doesn't exist? So people who are using the data really need to have a better understanding of the foibles of that data. It's messy data. Another weakness potentially is archives. So I think in England we're in a good, strong position where we do have a fantastic archive of aerial photographs. I mean, we were talking earlier about Norway. There doesn't seem to be so much available. But even within England, there are issues. So the Historic England Archive is an absolutely massive repository, but the vast majority of photographs have not been digitised. And so that means that people who want to undertake aerial survey have to go and visit the archive physically. And there are limits on the number of people that can visit the archive daily, and there are also limits on the numbers of aerial photographs that can be got out of the archive at any one time. So if you're undertaking work in England, you have to go to Swindon. It can very rapidly get expensive, and that might mean that you cannot undertake the survey. Another issue is the closure of many archives. So QCAP was the second largest aerial photograph repository, and that has now been closed for over 10 years. They hold some of the earliest photographs of archaeology in the UK. It hasn't been maintained. The person that was looking after the archive has retired. He's the only one that has a key. So it's an incredibly difficult situation. So the example here on the right is the earliest colour photograph of archaeology in England. And what does that mean if we are missing data? So this is a slide from showing the holdings over Wales. So the red triangles are the QCAP photographs and the blue dots are the Welsh Commission photography of Wales. And you can see that they're flying in different locations. So QCAP were tending to focus on the river valleys, whereas Toby Driver of the Welsh Commission seems to be focused more on upland areas. So the photographs are complementary, but we do know that QCAP is largely focused on archaeology. So if we don't have access to those photos, we are missing archaeological information. And so our archaeological record is incomplete. This is an example from an English example. So the red star marks the location of one QCAP photograph. And because they're some of the earliest photographs taken of England, that means that the archaeology that is mapped here on that QCAP, from that QCAP photograph, it was taken prior to the development of the housing estate. Our air photo unit didn't get into the air until the 60s, and therefore we don't have any photographs of that archaeology because that housing estate was built prior to that. So we're missing vast amounts of data. Let's have a look at opportunities, and I think this really is where AARGers can help out. So obviously AARG's got a really long history of providing in-person training, and we're also really keen at supporting young people getting into the archaeology sector. Historic England recently have been undertaking virtual work experience to really try and get people at 15 so that they really, really want a career in ruins. But is this something that we need to continue to develop? Do we need to look at providing online resources on the AARG website, for example? Having a think about guidance, Rebecca, don't groan. The aerial, so we do have internal aerial investigation and mapping guidance. We have talked often about making some sort of guidance available more widely. Obviously, a lot of us here were involved in the production of the guidance for LiDAR. Is this something that the Aerial Archaeology Research Group should push forward and try and get some aerial investigation and mapping guidance out there? Maybe not immediately, though. I think we all know that we are not going to be able to map all the archaeology on all the available photography, on all the available LiDAR as it becomes available. Do we need to embrace citizen science, perhaps on a Europe-wide project? Why not? Collaboration. So I think we come together each year, we have a fantastic time at AARG, and then we all go home and we sit back at our desks and we never speak again until the following year. And that's really sad. And what an opportunity missed. There's so many opportunities for the greater collaboration. And I think that's something that we really need to try and consider, and ways of making that work throughout the year. Don't groan, everyone, it's AI. I think a lot of us sat in this room probably know that we need to stop using AI, but it's expensive, it's time intensive, and to be honest, we don't really understand it and its applications. Again, is this something that we need to consider looking at more widely? We've got a vast training data set in England which can be used and has been used, but I think we're still at the early days. You're probably going to laugh here because I've used this example as continuing to develop methodologies and sources. This is a satellite image of the Yorkshire Wolds. Historic England are finally able to use satellite imagery, so our next project will involve satellite imagery for the first time. And it's just keeping in mind that there's always ways we can develop. Let's have a look at threats then. Okay, archaeological flyers. In the 1970s in the UK, there were over 40 archaeological flyers in the UK. I'm not going to say that the quality of the photographs was particularly good, but at least they were up there monitoring the air. And those photographs were deposited within the Historic England archive. Now, all we can think of are 3. 2 of those are based with Historic England, and also one with the Welsh Commission, which is Toby. If they stop flying, there's no one left. And I just want to say, Damien Grady, who flies in the south of England, which is mainly a lowland landscape, didn't feel that he had the experience necessary to train Robin, who's our latest recruit on the right-hand side. And so he turned to Toby, who flies in mountainous upland landscapes in Wales, to help train Robin in upland landscapes in the UK. So if we're losing some of those key players and they are reaching retirement age, what will happen? I know some of it can be offset by different sources, such as orthophotography and LiDAR, but it doesn't allow for a rapid response. So, for example, there's been a significant moorland fire in Yorkshire over last month. And so Robin, hopefully this week, is up taking photographs, providing vertical coverage of that site, and it will also go to help planning the regeneration of that moorland. And finally, funding concerns for aerial survey. Although funding in England has been relatively stable, perhaps over the last decade, I think there are fewer permanent roles. And really the main driver for that is the cost of living crisis, inflation. So the cost of each individual project has really gone up. And so that means that we aren't able to fund as many projects as we used to do. And so that's a significant issue. Perhaps AARGers need to look more widely for funding opportunities and grants. Okay, final slide. It's over to you, AARGers. What do you think the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats are for aerial archaeology? And what's one thing that maybe we could take away from this meeting and put into action to turn some of the threats and weaknesses into opportunities and strengths? Thank you.